Liberty's Ledger with Walter Hudson. Today's topic: which side is the source of polarization?
Just getting back from a trip to St. Paul, where I had breakfast this morning with a large group of folks at the St. Paul Event Center for the Juneteenth breakfast put on by the Minnesota Humanities Center. And it was a fascinating experience. I got a book that I didn't know I was going to get today, this book called The Moment. Apparently this guy's a big deal. He's on CNN or something. Good speaker. Got to hear him talk this morning. Got an autograph from him too. But I found it was interesting, that process of getting the book autographed. There are a bunch of us in line waiting at this book signing. And as I'm getting closer to the table, I notice that the table where Mr. Sellers is sitting is in front of this window that looks out onto the street. And we're on the second floor of this building where the event center is. And down below, on the ground level, huddled around the pillars of the Wells Fargo Center, there are 3 vagrants holding court. Each of them were white men, white male vagrants holding court on the street outside St. Paul, as up above them on the second floor of the St. Paul Event Center, you have a gathering of glitterati, dignitaries, public officials, people working in the nonprofit space, all sorts of VIPs, dressed to the nines, eating a fantastic breakfast, and getting ready to have a panel discussion on just how oppressed we are. Little bit of irony there, just a little bit, just a tiny, tiny bit. But listen, I did appreciate what Mr. Sellers had to say to a large extent. It's very clear that he and I would probably agree on very little when it comes to public policy, ideology, worldview. But he did say a couple of things that I found myself agreeing with. One was that we have to get out of our silos and really make an attempt to try to understand one another, which is why I was there. It's a big part of the reason why I was there, invited as part of the Council of Minnesotans of African Heritage. And that's true, but then he followed it up by talking about disinformation and putting down X, putting down Elon Musk, and so one of the questions that I submitted for the Q&A was, well, how does this work? How do we get out of our silos and start having a conversation with one another if dissenting opinion is simply going to be regarded as disinformation? And I liked his response. It was a fair response in principle. He said that there's nothing wrong with dissenting opinion. We invite dissenting opinion. Dissenting opinion is good. It has utility. But if I go outside and it's raining, don't tell me that the sky is orange or something to that effect. Basically making the case that disinformation is basically lies. Now, obviously, I agree with that sentiment, but the types of things that they're calling disinformation, that he is calling disinformation, are not so clear-cut, objective lies. They are matters of perspective and ideological persuasion, which are legitimate subjects of public discourse and public debate. And certainly on CNN, the likes of CNN, you're going to see an awful lot of the dismissal of conservative perspectives as de facto disinformation, simply because the folks who are engaged in the analysis don't like what it is that they're hearing. Okay, so by way of example, literally while Bakari Sellers was saying to us at the St. Paul Event Center that the Great Replacement theory qualifies as disinformation, Project Veritas was breaking the news that a Biden State Department official admitted that the Great Replacement agenda is real. He said that they want to change the demographics of the United States. Traditional standard Americans are not leftists. Latin Americans are all leftists. This is just to try and change the demographics of the United States, according to this U.S. consular officer who was interviewed by, unbeknownst to him, by a citizen journalist from Project Veritas. He went on to say, "I wish people knew we were letting in criminals to the United States daily." So, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. When you call something disinformation, but there is credible, factual information to back it up, what that communicates to the public is that you are not going to allow good faith debate on a given issue. You are going to try to discredit information that is inconvenient to your political agenda by calling it disinformation, when in point of fact there is objective evidence that the other side of the argument actually has a point. And this is what I mean. If you're going to make this case that we need to get out of our silos, I agree with you. You have, there have to be some standard rules. There have to be some kind of, we have to agree upon terms of what that means. And my position is, it means we have to consider objective reality. We have to consider objective facts. We have to be willing to engage in good faith on what is objectively before us. And if we're not willing to do that, then I really have to call into question the sincerity of your premise that you want us to get outside of our silos. Because currently the silos, to the extent that they exist, are defined by a refusal to accept information that conflicts with your pre-existing conceptions regarding what is true and what is false. And listen, I am entirely open to being presented with evidence 100% all the time, every day. I'm focused on the truth. I'm focused on what's real. And I would love for people to join me on that front, regardless of their political perspective, because I'm confident that my political perspective is backed up by fact. It's backed up by reality. It's backed up by what's objectively true. And that confidence guides me toward, I have no fear of the other side because of the confidence of the truth of what it is that I have to offer to the political discourse. Do you? Is that what you're bringing to the table? Are you confident that you're right? Are you confident that your ideology is sound? Are you confident that you're actually providing a value proposition to the people of the United States and here in the state of Minnesota? If you are, then what I'm saying should not threaten you. But the reaction that I've gotten to this definitely indicates that people are threatened. Here's Bakari Sellers saying that when I pointed out that at the breakfast that I attended this morning, he called the Great Replacement Theory disinformation, when at that very moment, Project Veritas was revealing the fact that it's objectively true. You have public officials confessing this is what we're doing, and we're doing it for political purposes. He pivoted to, I also called it racist, and it contributes to white supremacist violence. See Buffalo, thank you for coming. And listen, I appreciate his cordiality. And like I say, he signed my book. I appreciate that. I look forward to reading his book. I look forward to reviewing his book. I think there's going to be a lot of great information there. But I also called it racist. That's your argument. Your argument is that it's racist to affirm what you call the Great Replacement Theory. That's not an argument. You actually have to demonstrate how it's racist. I have demonstrated how it's objectively true. It is objectively true that foreigners are being let into the United States at unprecedented rates. And we now have a public official on the record saying that the purpose for that, the intention of that, is for a political purpose of skewing our body politic to the left. Okay? That's documented, that's established, that's true. You call it racist, which I understand has the rhetorical effect of a smoke bomb to try to distract us from the issue at hand, but you haven't actually demonstrated how you're right and how I'm wrong. I await that, right? Present me with the argument that what this public official interviewed by Project Veritas has confessed to is not true. If you can do that, I'm all ears. But you haven't. You've just pivoted to the racism accusation, which again goes totally counter to the idea that we're supposed to get outside of our own silos. That's obviously not the objective here. Other things he said that I agreed with, he talked about the lack of, in certain areas, like he talked about Denmark, South Carolina, where he comes from, small town, infrastructure issues, lack of infrastructure, kids learning in schools that are falling apart, having like open air classrooms for lack of facilities and things like that. Those are problems that properly ought to be fixed. I agree. Let's do it. Let's get on board. I don't know why in order to do that, we have to take hook, line, and sinker the entire critical race theory, everything's racism, everything's structural racism, institutional racism. Those things, it's interesting because the folks who agree with that, at least claim to agree with that, are often in charge of these places where there are such infrastructure disparities and funding disparities and disparities in outcome. These are usually Democrat-controlled areas, and yet the problems persist. That's weird. I wonder why that is. And again, I go back to folks dressed to the nines in a fancy room in downtown St. Paul, eating a fine breakfast, and it was a delicious breakfast. Many of whom are paid over six figures to engage in political advocacy, sitting there complaining about how oppressed they are, while outside, one floor down on the street, there are 3 white male vagrants. Maybe the category that we obsess ourselves with shouldn't be racial. It should be the status of the people. Socioeconomic status, infrastructure, integrity, academic outcomes, economic investment, regardless of the color of the people that are involved. Maybe that should be the approach. I don't know. Has the virtue of having not been tried. Anyway, looking forward to reading the book. The Moment. The racial reckoning that wasn't. Apparently we still need even more racial reckoning. I'll let you know what I think of it.
Liberty's Ledger with Walter Hudson. Like, share, and subscribe to show your support. Follow Walter on X at Walter Hudson. Visit hudsonformn.com.